All right, welcome back to the Business Roundtable podcast. I am your host, David Carr, founder of Steward Your Business, where we continue to bring guests to the podcast week after week. That's what I do, bring people together to accomplish great things as we help align people, processes, purpose for confident, scalable growth. And I'm excited about today's conversation because every business owner I know at some point has felt the pressure of wearing all the hats, especially when it comes to financial side of business. We're going to talk about going from survival to sustainability, which is big on me, stewardship. How do we do that well? And we're going to look at mindset, money systems that can hopefully give you back control, clarity and confidence in the work you're doing, whether you're the business owner or you're in charge of a certain area and aspect of your company. And so to do that, I'm excited to have somebody who has actually lived this for over 20 years. My guest is Megan Schwan, CEO and founder of Sidekick Accounting Services, which is a national virtual accounting firm that really has. I love your mission, Megan, is to help business owners make it. I mean, most businesses, 8 out of 10 don't make it. And I'm excited to really have you here. So Megan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, David. I'm so excited today for this conversation.
Absolutely. I mentioned earlier, you've been in this industry for over 20 years. You are actually a certified first professional, which we're going to get into a little later in the podcast, business scaling expert, really. And you've been a sought after trainer who've really helped many business owners understand their numbers and build healthier companies. And also what I appreciate about your own personal story, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more, is that you built this business while raising kids four.
Yes.
Four?
Yep.
Okay,
4.
yeah. Solo mom here doing it at first and then getting this and knowing, so what resilience is like, determination to get this done, take care of it, and doing it in a sustainable way. Here you are thriving. That's why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because you've been doing this now and doing it in a way that is healthy and sustainable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. It's been a journey for sure.
Well, I want to get into that because I love when you and I connected on LinkedIn. By the way, you guys, you can connect with Megan Schwan on LinkedIn, and we'll have all the show notes as far as websites for Sidekick Accounting and all that good stuff, so you can definitely follow up with her. But when we were talking, Megan, I really wanted the audience to hear your personal journey, and so. Talk a little bit about where you came from, and then where you are now. You've created Sidekick Accounting and been running this for years, but can you talk a little bit about your journey as a business owner?
Yeah, definitely. So the long story short is that I was a teen mom, and when I was in high school, I had a teacher. I was taking an accounting 101 class, and she just kind of encouraged me to think about making it a career. So when I got pregnant, it just seemed like a great way to be able to provide for my child, and myself, as I was starting to think forward that way. And then a couple of years later, I went to college got my bachelor's in accounting, and then got a job. During that time when I was in school, I had met my husband at the time, and worked a job basically from full time until I got pregnant with my son, my second child, and decided to not go back to work full time. So I got a job as a bookkeeper at a landscaping company. And that was kind of my introduction into small business. And my full-time position actually ended up calling me back. The person they hired to replace me didn't work out. They wanted me to work part-time. So then I was working 2 part-time jobs, basically mostly from home, and did that for about 2 years. And then at that point, I got laid off of both of those jobs within about a month of each other. So then it was like, okay, now what? And I always love other people's origin stories, because I think a lot of us come from this place of like, okay, now what? Like, something happens and you're like, all right, I got to figure this out. So for me, it was, I had my bachelor's, I was working in accounting, was doing bookkeeping for this landscaping company. I was doing taxes on the side for like friends and family. So it just kind of seemed to make sense to try and start doing my own thing where I could still work mostly from home, still be there for my family, but still provide. And that was basically how I started my business.
Wow.
Kind of fell into it. And at the time, though, I never imagined that it would get to, where it is now. Like now it's been almost 12 years. I've been working full time in my business for about 11 years. I ended up going back to work part time for a little while in there. And then, I've been just doing this for almost, 12 years. And I have a team now. We work with clients across the country, helping, hundreds of business owners every year change their mindset and their view of their finances, becoming more successful and sustainable businesses that provide for their families.
I love that.
Yeah, and then in the mix of that, I ended up having 2 more babies back to back, and then got divorced and moved across the country. And so it's just been like all these other things that my business has been able to help me provide for my family, make some quick choices, that were really important, and have options is what I always like to tell people. Like, my business was successful and sustainable where it gave me options to be able to provide for my family and make the decisions we needed. And that's really, the mission as well. Like, we want to change the statistic, but really what it comes down to is we really want to help people create successful and sustainable businesses so that when life happens, because it always does,
it always does,
able to make the right choices. We're able to create the culture, and provide for our team members and have this like ripple effect of impact that I think a lot of us really, that's why we do what we do, right? It's to really help people change their lives. So
absolutely.
the long and
That's why
short
we
of
have
it.
you on the podcast, Megan.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole purpose of the Business Roundtable, if you listen this far, we're over 130 episodes in. So I can't remember if I can look at the number when we're recording today, Megan. But the whole premise of this whole podcast was like, we want to bring information and allow people to experience leaders, people that are living from what they leading from what they live. And that's what I hear you doing, Megan, is you're doing this and you've done it in a very sustainable way. You've been taking care of yourself, taking care of your family. Now you have other clients, of many clients. You have a team that you're supporting. And so when for you was the turning point when you realized I'm going to get into mindset here. You brought this up, but when was the turning point when you realized you needed the systems and the structures of a kind of I guess a CEO mindset to move from just surviving into, okay, we want to do this sustainably,
Yeah.
What does that look like for you?
For me, I think it really, like, the time when I can really remember it is when I was getting ready to have my 3rd child. So I knew I wasn't going to be able to work as much. At that time, I had 2 employees working, or almost 2 employees. I had 1 employee, and then I was planning on hiring another employee. And I knew that I needed to, well, she was actually working. Sorry, let me stumble a little bit. So I did have 2 employees because she was working part-time out of my house, my one employee. And it was like, okay, now we need to like start to shift a little bit. So I got like an outside office. She was going to go work there full time. And it was around that time when I was like, okay, we really need to have like a little bit more of a system in place for like how to do things. It was very clunky, if I can be honest.
That's part of the journey, right?
You just kind of like stumble and figure it out. And so, but that was definitely like the time when I can remember, okay, we need to start thinking about this. That was about 3 years in to me having my business. And so it was, around that time. And that's what we see a lot too, honestly, when we get new clients, like around that 3-year mark, it's like, okay, I kind of know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I kind of have a direction. I can start to refine that. So it was the same for me. It was like, okay, we need to start getting systems in place. And then as we started growing as a team was definitely kind of that other trigger, or whatever you want to call it, when it was like, okay, we really need to get like some like actual SOPs and like, and we're still working, honestly, we're still working on refining that and getting like, now it's like we have a bookkeeping department and a tax department, and I have a sales, kind of department that I'm bringing on and developing, and administration. So it's like, we need to have systems in place for all of the areas of business, not just like the obvious ones, if you will. So it's definitely a journey, and you always have to kind of go back and say, okay, we have this system in place, but how do we refine it? How do we improve it? Does it still get us where we need to go? So I'm always of the mindset of like, it doesn't really stop putting systems in place, because you got to just test and remeasure, and things change as you grow, and your services change or your products change, and you gotta be willing to like always go back and say, okay, we have this in place, but how do we make it better? Is it still relevant? How do we keep going? But that was definitely like the first, like, yep, we need to do this.
I mean, that's great. I think I think that is certainly differentiates the CEO versus maybe an employee that's just kind of like just transactional, not thinking about those things. And you
Yeah.
have to look. What I hear you say, Megan, is you're looking at the day to day, but you're also looking at the future. What does that look like, and how does that team? Somebody has to be looking at that so the rest of the team can go in their directions. But if nobody's looking at that, and I think sometimes there's that book, E-Myth by Michael Gerber. He talks about, people start right as a they stay maybe more of a technician. And what I hear you saying is, say, if you think a little differently, that is part of it, but you can't stay that to grow and scale business. Maybe if you just it's just you and a job and that's it.
Right.
I mean, you're just creating essentially a job. It's not really a company. It's
Right.
just a job. And what I hear you saying is you transition from, yes, I was doing these jobs into an actual company. What would you say is, just to get at that a little bit, what's one belief that maybe an owner needs to challenge if they want to move from getting overwhelmed into this place of what I feel like you're owning it, you're stewarding it. Like, what do you see, Megan, what's a belief or beliefs that owners get stuck on?
I think a lot of people get really stuck on this premise that only I can do this, or only I can do this the right way, kind of this thing. And I know, I was of the mindset, like, I needed to delegate because I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to have a newborn and, do everything that I was doing. So I think, a little bit against the grain when it comes to that. But I know a lot of business owners are like, no, I can't, I got to keep it all here. And, nobody's going to be able to do it like me. And I think the mindset shift has to be this acknowledgement that you're right. Nobody will be able to do it quite as well as you per se. But if they can do it, what do they say, like 70 to 80% as well as you, that is enough to like let it go. And for me, like, even though I had this thought of like, okay, I need to delegate, when you actually start to put it in practice, you start to see like the freedom of it, if you will, of like, okay, I can start letting these things go so that I'm not just the technician, so that I can come in and be that higher level strategic thinker to grow my organization, to impact our clients. Because when we're always doing like the technical stuff, we can't do product development, product and service development. We can't build a culture. We can't think about that impact. So like, if you are always stuck in the weeds, you're not going to ever be able to see, kind of the fuller picture of what you're really trying to create within your business. Like you said, you'll just have a job, and you gotta be open to having that kind of shift where it's like, yes, people might not be able to do it exactly the way that I can do it. And maybe that isn't even the right way per se, because people are going to hire the right people, brings a whole host of new levels of service and expertise. And like, you want to hire above your expertise if you want to make this work. So like opening it up, like, helps to improve it overall. And you can still like put things into place where it's still like you and like the way you want to show up. Like, you hire team members with the same characteristics and the same values and the same mindset. Like, there's ways that you can still have you in it, but you have way more freedom to create that if you start to be okay with letting it go. So.
I love that. No, that's so true, Megan. I find the same thing, and we're going to get into a little more on the financial side of that, but I see that in the people side, like you said. And that's why we have you on the podcast, because as you're listening to this, you're a business owner and you're trying to hold everything together in the financial space, if that's where you're at, and you're not getting outside help or perspective. You may be really missing out. And here you have Megan, who's worked with lots of different companies in lots of different industries, market sectors. You can get and connect with her. And so I want to make sure you guys do that. But Megan, I think what's really important, what I hear you saying is that once you start to open yourself to this, now you can hear Megan's been doing this for 12 years, creating a sustainable company. Most companies don't make it 12 years. You're lucky if they make it a year or two, because they don't have this philosophy and way of thinking. And so leads me into this next portion of the podcast I want to get into with you is you're a profit first. We've talked about this in the past, it's been a while, but a profit first, focusing on this. And I think everybody wants to make profit in their company, but maybe they don't know the right thinking about it. And so could you break us down, and when I say profit first, what does that mean to you? And how do you help business owners kind of get to that perspective of like, get out of their own way? Like we said earlier, they're like trying to do many things, and you're like, okay, hey, you're not focusing on the things that are most important here. Let's break it down. So can you break that down for us?
Yeah. So the whole like general concept of profit first is we think of profit as like sales or revenue minus expenses, whatever's left over is your profit.
Yep.
Well, with profit first, we kind of flip it around where we take sales, take the profit first, and then whatever's left over is used for expenses. And what this does is a couple of things. One is that it helps to force profitability, because if you can't take profit off the top, and profit isn't just what's left over after expenses. True profit is being able to pay yourself. It's being able to save for taxes. It's being able to strategically reinvest. So if you're not able to do those things, or if you have a hard time doing those things, then your business probably isn't truly profitable and working for you, right? So it forces that profitability, which might look like revisiting your pricing, or cutting expenses that don't serve you, or readjusting your business model, or looking at your efficiencies, right? Those are the different ways that you can increase profit. But the other thing is that when we are like entrepreneurs in general, I think we have this innate ability to be, or tendency to be, problem solvers. So when we use a model like this or a system like this, and we're forcing profit to come off the top, what it's doing is it's creating this restriction of like, we can only work with what's left over for our expenses, which actually ends up making us more innovative and more strategic, and kind of like looking at things from outside of the box instead of in the box. And this happens a lot when there are outside factors. But what we're doing is we're kind of creating an internal factor for this to happen. This is what happened, during 2008 and 2009, when we started to see the creation of Airbnb and Uber and like all these different like big companies that came to light, because it was like, now we have to do this. We saw it again on a larger scale during COVID, when people had to pivot or evolve in order to survive, right? Because it was just so, crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the businesses that did survive and did well during that time was because they did start thinking outside of the box. So what we're doing is we're kind of, with using a system like that, it's like you're kind of fabricating this situation where you have to get creative, and that ends up making you more innovative, which is one big powerful piece behind the system and methodology.
No, I could see that, Megan. I mean, so for somebody that hasn't done this before, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, I'm just the same old way." I'm like, whatever remains is kind of what, quote unquote, my profit. Instead of flipping, you're flipping it around. You're saying like, what does that look like? Now, some may not have an idea of like, well, what should that be? Is that 5%? Is that 10%? Is that 20%? What does that look like? Because obviously every industry is different, and there's some different things, and what I say reasonable. And when you work with clients, Megan, do you look at the industry, or do you look at, say, okay, here's kind of some standards? Because we don't want to live in a, say 80-90% profitability. Maybe you can do that in some industries. In other industries, it's going to be very much smaller, but just have some reality check, because at the end of the day, we don't want to be like, well, that I'm not even close, right? So, and that's just demoralizing. So talk a little bit about like, how do you work with clients to come up with what's something that is reasonable, that actually makes sense for a profitability, so they actually can achieve it, instead of like either completely, making it achievable. What does that look like?
Well, Mike Michalowicz, who's the founder of this methodology, he wrote a book called Profit First. He did an extensive study of businesses in certain revenue brackets, and found out like what their percentages were. So these are like the top performing businesses in these different revenue brackets. But we don't start there. Those are what we call target allocation percentages. When we start working with a client, we look at where you're at now. So for some of our clients, they haven't saved for taxes. So taxes is a zero. They might not have saved for profit. Profits is zero. Their operating expenses might be 80% and the target's 50%. So what we do is we first look at where you're at, and then we just make incremental changes, because really that's the only way for change to be sustainable, right? Is like you got to make it small bites. Small bites, small steps, small pieces. So we might start with a 1%, allocation to profit, or a 1% allocation to tax, and then gradually move that up from there. And typically we would meet with our clients. We'd get the system in place, and then we meet with our clients a couple times a month, but we reevaluate, we relook at the numbers on a quarterly basis and make an adjustment to the allocations based off of those small changes, what's happening, in the last quarter, to move towards those target allocation percentages. And some people never meet the target allocation percentages because maybe you need something different out of your business. Like for me, when I had my two babies back to back, I took a little bit of not a pay cut, but like that wasn't my priority, wasn't paying myself. It was having more time flexibility. So I hired more people, maybe decreased my profit a little bit, but I was able to have more time for my family. And that's what I needed out of my business. And I think that's the really important part, is we start there with all of our clients, is like, what do you want out of this thing that you're doing? Like, what's the goal here? What's your why? What's your big vision, your BHAG, your goal, for your business, because then you can kind of work it backwards. So it's a combination of things, but that's how you start doing it. You just start small, make those little incremental changes to get towards your target. Having that goal somewhere to go is really important, but you don't start, you don't go 0 to 60 when you're doing these kind of things, when you're starting to make changes. And I'm sure it's the same thing with you, when you work with your clients. It's like, you can't blow up.
Like, I want to just fix culture overnight. Everybody just be on the same page. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. Right. So same thing with the financials.
Right. Well, I love to hear that from you too, Megan, because I hope people are hearing this, is like, because sometimes people are like, well, I meet with my accountant once a year or whatever. It's like, well, that's not enough. I meet with a tax planner once a year. What I'm hearing is, and if anybody, we're recording this in middle of November here, 2025. We just coming out of government shutdown. Tariffs have been up and down. The markets are shifting. And so I like what you're saying, Megan, of like, you might have had a target for a percentage and things shift. But I think the power of what you're saying is like, you have something out there, you've staked something out, you've got clarity of saying, well, this is what I want. And then I'm intentionally adjusting up or down based on new information versus kind of in a black hole. Like, I don't know. And I've talked with business owners, basically, Megan, that are kind of blind. They're like, they don't really have clear understandings. And talk a little bit about like, how do they, they maybe be drowning even in QuickBooks. They're like, okay, I can get in QuickBooks or whatever the accounting software they're using, but they still lack clarity. And so they're not really understanding the numbers. And so like, that's what I'm hearing you say, is like, you're looking at things weekly and monthly to make sure, like, what do you see like they should be looking at so they can scale this sustainably over time?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I mean, Profit First it's a cash flow management system, so it's a little bit different than just like accounting financials. What I think it does, and what I've seen it do for like our clients and everybody, in our community that uses it, is that it really helps bridge the gap between what happens on a day-to-day basis and your monthly reports. Both are important, but one kind of makes money more tangible, which is like the cash flow management system, Profit First. It makes it money more tangible for people, because we're creating these different buckets through bank accounts to prioritize these different areas. And then you can kind of compare that with what's going on a monthly basis and ask those higher level questions. You'll start to kind of see the red flags in this cash flow management system if something's not working out, like if your account is short, or like you got some payrolls coming through and you're like, oh, it's cutting it close. Those are kind of the red flags that are waving of like, hey, there's something here that needs to get addressed, right? Something's wrong or something's off.
Yep.
I think it was I think Ron, who's one of the other founders for Profit First, he said, I have it written down actually.
Yeah.
He said Profit First doesn't fix your business, but it does reveal everything that needs to be fixed in your business. And it's very true that works out like that. So, putting systems like that in is really important. And also just spending time with your numbers. Like, I think a lot of people are like, how do I, what do I do? Like, my bookkeeping's done, I'm getting these reports, but I don't know what to do with them. The thing is that every decision you make goes back to your numbers, whether you know it or not. So the more time you can spend in your numbers, the more you'll start to see this correlation between my decisions or your decisions and how it reflects in your numbers. And so having both of those tools in place, your monthly financials, which is important. Sometimes people don't look at their financials monthly or have their bookkeeping done monthly. But when you do, it's more consistent. You can remember what happened over the last month, right? Instead of trying to remember. But also cash flow, the Profit First service or system, which we usually are, or our clients are usually interacting in that system on a weekly basis. So you can move the money around, and that makes it more tangible. Having those two tools together helps you as a business owner to be more empowered and have this better understanding of how do my decisions affect my numbers, and then being able to use that to be a better decision maker, because you're basing it off of data versus basing it off of feelings, or flying blind because you're avoiding it.
Right. So to me, that brings up. I mentioned earlier in the podcast, you've built in your resilience in your own company. You've made it through a lot of ups and downs, and like I said, a lot of business owners by using this, tying what I hear you saying, uses this Profit First method and framework with their financial recording, it's going to make them maybe not making things so emotionally or uncertain, or like, oh my goodness. I mean, we've always heard the person, the stock market goes down, they're like, sell everything. You're like, hold on, wait, before you start selling everything, let's take a bigger picture here, right? Let's look at everything, look at the landscape. And that's what I hear say, so that you're using a proven system, in this case Profit First, with an expert that knows the system well. So it's not just oh, I've read the book, but you're actually having somebody that's coming alongside you. And that's what I even do your business, is like, yes, you can read a book or watch a video, but having somebody that's what I call a Sherpa or a guide to come alongside with you is so much more powerful, and you go so much more further and feel like you have a team member, a part of you, instead of like, and I feel like that's what a lot of business owners do. Well, oh, I should just know this stuff, or I should just figure this out. It's like, no, we don't all know this stuff. I'm not a financial whiz. That's why I have you on the podcast. I can tell you a lot about people, because that's what I focus on, organizational health. But when you ask me about the numbers, I need help. Right.
Yeah. We can be experts at everything, so that's why it is important to bring along, partners and sidekicks, right? That's the name of our company.
I love it.
Is that for a reason? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that we can be that along people's business journey, because you can't figure it out on your own, and you shouldn't, like, you're going to get farther faster going somewhere together, with other people versus trying to do it yourself. So,
well, would you say that's, I mean, I'm going back to a CEO mindset earlier, and we talk about, I'm going to use numbers. People think about how much things cost versus an investment. And when, so oftentimes what I hear, and I love you have speak to this, if you're a CEO and you're like, this is going to cost me, just to think about the mindset of this is going to cost me. So sometimes when I'm talking with potential clients, well, it's going to cost me this. I'm like, that's one way of thinking about it. But what about if you flipped it around and said, this is an investment, and what would be the return on that investment? Can you speak to that in your experience with working with business owners?
Yeah. I always like to say, like, as business owners, we have to take calculated risks. And so part of that is understanding, like, what is the ROI on our decisions, right? So maybe it's something that's, a little bit more cut and dry, where it's like, if I invest this, I'm going to get, this. But sometimes it's a little bit more of that strategy or that mindset or that accountability and that support. And so, like, if you're trying to get to a certain place and you've been trying to, do it yourself and haven't made much progress, then it might be worth your investment to, hire somebody like me or somebody like David to get you to a certain place faster. And a lot of times it is because, again, you can figure it out on your own. Like, that's kind of the thinking that I've always had when I've made decisions to do different investments in myself and my company, is like, I
Mhm.
could figure this out myself. Like, I'm a smart person, but it's going to take me probably 5 times as long to figure it out versus just trying to hire somebody who already
Yeah,
knows what
yeah.
they're doing. And that's
Right?
on like the coaching and bookkeeping side. And that's what I tell people too. It's like, okay, one of the ways to understand return on investment is to understand like what your time is worth. And there's different methods of figuring that out. But starting there can give you a good insight. If my time is worth, $50 plus an hour, and I can hire somebody to do this one thing or this task, and it's going to cost me, $15 an hour. Well, then it becomes kind of a no-brainer, right? Like, it's like you
Mhm.
should hire because you only have so much time. And your time as CEO, and this is a mindset shift too, your time as CEO should only be spent on the things that only you can do. So like if
Mm.
it's something that people like you can't delegate out, things like, being the face of your company, being the leader, the
Mhm.
strategizer, the manager, those are things that, depending on the size of your business, of course, but those are the things that typically only a CEO would be able to do, or you as the CEO would only be able to do. Everything else, you should be looking for ways to delegate.
Right. Well, and I think this is a big thing too, Megan. What I found working with small businesses in particular is what you're doing today is going to shift, and
Hmm.
what you need to be focusing on a shift. And so what I hear you saying is being a good steward of what's entrusted to you and where do you need to focus. Because talk a little
Yeah.
bit about your own personal journey there, because as a mom in leadership, what you started at year 1 or 2 is different now that you're doing year 12, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a lot different. It's a lot different, and it's definitely been a journey of, shifting my mindset as well as becoming a better version of myself, really. Because I
Mhm.
think, when it comes to being a leader in your company, you have this trickle down effect, so
Yep.
like wherever you're at, like that's going to impress on your team and where they're at, which, can also lead to your customers and clients and where they're at. So like it has this whole like thing trickling down. So what I've just kind of learned is that taking care of myself is really important, making sure I have enough sleep, making sure that I'm eating better, that I'm moving my body, like all those basic
Yep.
things that sometimes we put aside, especially
Yeah.
women. I think we struggle with this a lot more. It's like we can't take care of ourselves because we got all this other stuff to do for all
Yes.
these other people. But
Yep.
really, it is coming down to like taking care of yourself and then also investing in yourself. So, kind of going back to that ROI thing,
Mhm.
sometimes it is working with somebody that's going to help you get there faster or see things from a different perspective, because we can get in the weeds and we can't go to our team with some of these things. We got to go kind of like higher or,
Mhm.
vertical with who we're talking to so that we can get that perspective. So a lot of times it is a big return on investment. And then specifically for like our clients, when we work with them on profit first and with their bookkeeping, they get this sense of empowerment of like, oh, now I understand my numbers. Now taxes aren't scary. Now I can look at this information and make decisions that I'm confident in. Now I can see the patterns, versus waiting for the ball to drop. So, like that, some of those things become really priceless for a lot of people because it's something they struggle with for so
Mhm.
long that they finally get this clarity and they finally start to feel like, oh, I can do this. Like I know what I'm talking about. And that is like you can't really put a number on that per se, but
Yes.
but it's really important to be able to invest in yourself as a leader on all fronts, because you are making a huge impact on everybody who comes after you, your employees and your clients and your family, and figuring
Yeah.
that out is a big important piece of the whole journey of being a business owner, but just being a human in general too. So
Well, I love you saying that, Megan, because that was my own personal journey as well within a company, and then starting to steward your business was I got to get healthy. What does that look like?
mhm.
And there's different areas, just like you said, our physical health, our spiritual health. There's all different areas that we can always improve
Yeah,
in our life,
mental health.
and
Mhm.
right. And I think
Mhm.
for those of you that realizing that, hey, I need help particularly in the financial house, if you will, of the members, Megan is a resource. And like I said, we're going to put her links in the show notes. Megan and I are connected on LinkedIn. You guys can go connect with her there, so that you can learn more about Sidekick Accounting. If you're like, okay, who's somebody else that I can trust, talk through, get an idea about this, Megan. So I really love that. And I hope those that are listening to us really take that to heart. Don't beat yourself up. But one of the things you said earlier was incremental change. This is not overnight. And I think people, unfortunately in our world today where there's instant like dopamine hits because of social media and other things,
right,
we were getting hijacked a little bit about the work that is done with things that you do in financials, and same thing with me in organizational health. If they do this work, and anybody that have done anything in investing knows the rule of compounding, right? It starts off small, but over time, if you keep at it and you're disciplined, it's exponential almost. I mean, it's like it continues to grow if you do it, if you steward it and manage it well. Okay, this
right,
is right. But what I think is important is that if you start this sooner than later, you're going to see the results.
yeah,
And we do want to get you wins. I like what you said too earlier. Get those wins, but they'll be small at first. You're not going to get a grand slam necessarily, hit it out of the park, but you're going to get single after single after single, for those that are like
right.
baseball. And that's what we wanted to help you do. Same thing with me and steward your business and your teams. So I know we're getting to the end of the podcast, Megan, but we covered a lot, from mindset to profit first mentality, systems. Speak to our audience here, whether it's the business owner, or perhaps it's a department head or somebody else that's tied into the financial health of an organization. Speak to an action or something that they can do as we're leaving the podcast today, so that they can say, okay, I heard this, I took this information, but I could actually do something with it. What would you empower them to do as we wrap up the podcast today?
Well, I would say two things, if I may.
Yes,
One
please.
is, if you haven't done any kind of like saving or anything like that, like set up a profit account and a tax account, just two accounts. Start putting 1% of your income every month or every week into those accounts, and just kind of watch it build and see the impact, and then incrementally increase that. Even if you don't do anything else with profit first, do those two things, or that one thing with two accounts. And then the other thing that I would encourage people to do is set aside some time to actually look at your numbers, like print off your P&L and look at it and write down, like, why is this way, or why is that way, or what happened here. Just start spending a little bit of time, even if it's like 10 minutes a week, in your numbers, or once a month in your numbers, because you have to become like comfortable with things before you can like really dig into it. And just by setting up that action, setting up that habit, it's going to get you more comfortable. It's kind of like working out. Like working out's a really great like analogy to like finance, fitness too. It's like when you start working out, it's not, you don't go and do the hour-long workout, because that's just not going to be sustainable, like you do the 5-10 minute walk, and that's the same thing. Like if you haven't spend time, if you really struggle with this numbers area, like I encourage you, like print off your bank statements, print off your P&L, and just look at the numbers and start asking yourself those questions, like, why is it this way? What's in this account? And just do a little bit exploring into your own finances. And the more you do that, the more comfortable you're going to get with it. And then the more you're going to start to see it for what it is, which is really a tool to help you be a better business owner or a leader. So
there you go. Right from Megan, Sidekick Accounting. Megan, it is a real pleasure having you on the podcast and sharing your insights. I'm excited for our listeners to go check you out, Sidekick Accounting. Go connect with her on LinkedIn. Megan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, David. It was a fun conversation. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, you guys, we love having you here. Of course, like and subscribe. Leave your comments. We'll make sure that Megan gets them. Whether you find us on Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, wherever the case might be, LinkedIn. We're so appreciative of you guys following along and being a part of the Business Roundtable podcast journey. Until next time, be well. Take good care of yourselves. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.